What if failure wasn't something to dread, but a hidden teacher guiding you toward growth? The great Stoic philosopher once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." These words hold the key to transforming how we perceive failure, not as a dead end, but as a stepping stone. Stoicism, an ancient philosophy rooted in practicality, offers timeless tools to help us reframe failure and build unshakable resilience. In this video, we'll explore 22 Stoic teachings that serve as a roadmap to overcoming the fear of failure. These principles aren't just philosophical musings. They're actionable, relevant, and designed to help you see failure not as a threat, but as an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and more confident. So, if you've ever felt held back by the fear of failing, this is your invitation to discover a new way forward. Let's begin. Stoics teach us to not just accept failure, but to embrace it. This might sound counterintuitive at first. Why would anyone celebrate setbacks or mistakes? But the Stoic principle of, or love of fate, invites us to see failure not as an enemy, but as a teacher. It's about shifting our perspective from fear and resistance to curiosity and gratitude. As Epictetus once said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." In other words, focus on what you can control, your effort, your attitude, your response, and let go of the rest. This mindset doesn't just reduce the fear of failure, it transforms it into a source of growth and strength. Think about Thomas Edison, for example. He failed thousands of times before inventing but he famously said, "I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." For Edison, each failure was a stepping stone, a lesson that brought him closer to success. He didn't see failure as the end of the road, he saw it as part of the journey. That's the essence of falling in love with the process, even when it's messy or painful. Now take a moment to reflect on your own life. Can you think of a recent failure or setback? Maybe it was a project that didn't go as planned, a goal you didn't reach, or a relationship that didn't work out. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, ask yourself, what did this teach me? How did it make me stronger or wiser? When we approach failure with this mindset, it loses its power to intimidate us. It becomes just another part of life's unfolding story, one that we can learn from and grow through. This shift in perspective doesn't happen overnight, of course. It takes practice and patience to reframe failure as something to embrace rather than fear. But when we do, we unlock a deeper sense of resilience and peace. We stop seeing failure as a reflection of our worth and start seeing it as an opportunity to evolve. That's the power of it's not just about accepting what happens to us. It's about finding meaning and purpose in every twist and turn. Imagine for a moment that today was your last day on Earth. How would your fear of failure change if you truly understood that life is finite? This is the essence of the Stoic practice called memento, a Latin phrase meaning, "remember you must die." It's not about dwelling on death in a morbid way, but about using the awareness of life's impermanence as a tool to reframe how we see our challenges, including failure. The Stoics believed that recognizing the brevity of life helps us focus on what truly matters. As Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." When we waste time worrying about failure, we're essentially squandering the precious moments we have. Think about it. In the grand scheme of things, how significant is that mistake you're afraid to make? How much does that rejection or setback really matter in the face of life's bigger picture? This practice shifts our perspective. Instead of fearing failure, we begin to see it as a small, inevitable part of the journey, a stepping stone rather than a roadblock. When we remember that our time is limited, we're more likely to take action, to prioritize what's meaningful over what's merely perfect. Perfectionism often paralyzes us, But Memento reminds us that waiting for the perfect moment is a luxury we don't have. Here's a modern way to apply this. Ask yourself, what would I do today if I weren't afraid to fail? Maybe it's starting that project you've been putting off, having that difficult conversation, or pursuing a dream you've been too scared to chase. When you consider the fleeting nature of life, the fear of failure loses its grip. It's not about ignoring the possibility of failure. It's about accepting it as part of the process and moving forward anyway. So take a moment to reflect. What would you do differently if you truly embraced the idea that your time is limited? How would your actions change if you stopped letting fear hold you back? This isn't about being reckless, it's about being intentional. It's about choosing to live fully, even when failure is a possibility, because in the end, it's the risks we take, not the fears we avoid, that define our lives. Fear of failure often stems from trying to control the uncontrollable. This is where Stoic philosophy offers a powerful shift in perspective. The ancient Stoic teacher Epictetus taught a principle called the dichotomy of control, which divides life into two categories: what is within our power and what is not. He famously said, "Some things are in our control and others are not. Our thoughts, actions, and efforts, these are within our control. But outcomes, other people's opinions, and external circumstances, those are not." When we confuse the two, we set ourselves up for frustration, anxiety, and yes, fear of failure. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you're preparing for a big presentation at work. You can control how much time you spend researching, practicing your delivery, and organizing your slides. But you can't control how your audience will react, whether they'll agree with your points, or even if technical issues might arise during the presentation. If you focus solely on the outcome, whether you'll be praised or criticized, you're setting yourself up for stress. But if you shift your focus to what you can control, your preparation and effort, you'll find that the fear of failure loses its grip. You've done your part, and that's where your energy belongs. Here's a challenge for you. Think about a situation in your life where you feel anxious about failing. Now, write down 3 things you can control in that scenario. Maybe it's the time you dedicate to practice, the mindset you bring to the task, or the way you respond to setbacks. By identifying what's truly within your power, you're not only reducing fear, but also reclaiming your sense of agency. This is the essence of Stoic wisdom, focusing on what you can influence and letting go of the rest. It's not about ignoring outcomes. It's about understanding that your effort is where your power lies. What if you visualized the worst-case scenario and realized it's not so bad? This is the heart of a powerful Stoic practice called negative visualization. It might sound counterintuitive, but imagining the worst can actually free you from the grip of fear. By mentally preparing for failure, you strip away its emotional weight, making it easier to face challenges head-on. As Seneca once said, we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Think about that for a moment. How often have you stressed over something that never even happened? Let's break this down with a practical example. Imagine you're preparing for a job interview. Instead of focusing solely on acing it, take a moment to visualize what could go wrong. What if you stumble over your words? What if the interviewer seems uninterested? What if you don't get the job? By walking through these possibilities, you're not only preparing yourself emotionally, but also creating a mental safety net. If the worst happens, you've already faced it in your mind, and it no longer feels overwhelming. This exercise doesn't mean you're giving up, it means you're building resilience. Negative visualization isn't about dwelling on fear, it's about disarming it. When you confront your fears in advance, you realize that even the worst-case scenario is something you can handle. This practice shifts your perspective from avoidance to empowerment. So the next time you're facing a challenge, big or small, Try this exercise. Visualize the worst, accept it, and then move forward with confidence. You might just find that the fear of failure loses its power over you. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. This is a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, and it's a mindset that can completely transform how you approach failure. For the Stoics, courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about recognizing fear and choosing to move forward anyway. It's about understanding that fear isn't your enemy. It's an opportunity to grow, to test your limits, and to prove to yourself what you're capable of. One of the greatest Stoic thinkers put it this way: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, the obstacles you face aren't roadblocks. They're the very path to your success. They're what push you to develop resilience, to innovate, and to find strength you didn't know you had. Think about J.K., who faced countless rejections before Harry Potter was finally published. She didn't let fear of failure stop her. Instead, she used it as fuel to keep going, to refine her work, and to prove her critics wrong. Her courage wasn't about being unafraid. It was about refusing to let fear dictate her actions. And that's the kind of courage the Stoics championed. It's not about being invincible. It's about being unshakable in your commitment to your goals, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Now take a moment to reflect. Where in your life do you need to summon more courage? Is there a dream you've been putting off because you're afraid of failing? A conversation you've been avoiding because you're scared of rejection? Courage isn't about waiting until you feel ready. It's about taking that first step, even when your knees are shaking. The Stoics remind us that bravery isn't reserved for the extraordinary. It's a choice we can all make, one small act at a time. So, what's standing in your way? And more importantly, how can you turn that obstacle into your path forward? What if your fear of failure isn't about the failure itself, but about the doubts you carry within? This is a question Stoicism invites us to sit with. At the heart of this ancient philosophy is the practice of self-reflection, a tool that helps us dig beneath the surface of our fears and uncover what's truly driving them. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher was a master of this practice. He kept a personal journal, now known as Meditations, where he examined his thoughts, emotions, and actions. Through this process, he didn't just confront his fears, he found a wellspring of inner strength. As he wrote, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." This idea of turning inward might sound simple, but its power is profound. When we reflect on our experiences, especially our failures, we begin to see patterns. Maybe you hesitate to take risks because you're afraid of what others will think. Or perhaps you hold yourself to impossible standards, equating failure with inadequacy. Journaling helps us untangle these beliefs and see them for what they are: thoughts, not truths. It's like holding up a mirror to your mind, allowing you to question, challenge, and ultimately transform the stories you tell yourself. Let's bring this into the modern world. What if, instead of avoiding failure, you started keeping a failure journal? It's not about dwelling on mistakes, but about learning from them. Each time you stumble, take a moment to write down what happened, how it made you feel, and what you can take away from it. Did you discover a new approach? Did you learn something about your limits or your resilience? Over time, this practice shifts your perspective. Failure stops being a source of shame and becomes a teacher, guiding you toward growth. So here's a challenge for you. Think about a recent failure. Maybe it was a project that didn't go as planned, a conversation that didn't go well, or a goal you didn't achieve. Grab a notebook and write about it. What did you learn? How did it change you? By reflecting on these moments, you're not just addressing your fear of failure, you're building a deeper understanding of yourself. And that, as the Stoics remind us, is where true strength lies. Stoicism offers a powerful tool for navigating life's setbacks: equanimity. The Stoics teach us to remain calm in the face of failure, not as a sign of indifference, but as a way to respond with clarity and purpose. This principle reminds us that our reactions, not the events themselves, hold the key to our peace of mind. As Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This simple yet profound idea shifts the focus from what we can't control, like external outcomes, to what we can, our mindset and response. Imagine you're giving a presentation, and halfway through, you completely lose your train of thought. The room falls silent and panic starts to creep in. In that moment, equanimity becomes your greatest ally. Instead of spiraling into fear or embarrassment, you take a deep breath, acknowledge the stumble, and calmly regain your footing. By staying composed, you not only salvage the situation but also demonstrate resilience and poise, qualities that leave a lasting impression on your audience. Now think about a time when you faced failure and reacted emotionally. Maybe you lashed out in frustration or entirely. Looking back, how might equanimity have changed your response? The Stoic approach isn't about suppressing emotions, but about channeling them into thoughtful action. It's about recognizing that failure is temporary, and our ability to remain steady in its face is what defines our growth. So the next time you encounter a setback, pause and ask yourself, how can I respond with calm and intention, rather than letting fear or frustration take the wheel? What if failure wasn't something to fear, but instead a source of valuable information? What if it wasn't a judgment on your worth, but simply data, feedback to guide your next steps? This is exactly how the Stoics saw failure, not as an endpoint, but as a tool for growth. Seneca, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, put it beautifully when he said, "Failure changes for the better, success for the worse." At first glance, that might sound counterintuitive. But think about it. When we fail, we're forced to pause, reflect, and adapt. Success, on the other hand, can sometimes make us complacent, blinding us to areas where we could improve. Take the story of someone like the founder of. Early in her career, she faced countless rejections and failures while trying to pitch her idea. Instead of seeing those setbacks as proof that her idea was flawed, she used them as feedback. Each no taught her something new about her pitch, her product, even herself. Over time, she refined her approach and today is a household name. Didn't let failure define her, she let it refine her. This is the Stoic mindset in action. When you encounter failure, instead of letting it knock you down, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I use this experience to grow? By shifting your perspective, you transform failure from a source of fear into a stepping stone. So the next time you face a setback, try reframing it. See it not as a reflection of your ability, but as a chance to gather insights and improve. After all, every great success story is built on a foundation of lessons learned from failure. Fear of failure often stems from worrying about the future. What might go wrong, what could happen, or how things might not turn out as planned. The Stoics, however, offer a powerful antidote to this anxiety, the practice of living fully in the present moment. One of Stoicism's most revered figures put it simply yet profoundly: confine yourself to the present. This isn't just a suggestion. It's a deliberate strategy to free ourselves from the grip of fear and uncertainty. When we focus on the here and now, we strip away the layers of what-ifs and maybes that so often paralyze us. The future, after all, is uncertain. It's a realm of possibilities, not guarantees. By directing our energy toward what we can control in the present, we reclaim our power and reduce the mental clutter that fuels fear. Think about it. When you're fully engaged in the task at hand, there's no room for worry about what might happen tomorrow or next week. You're simply here, doing what needs to be done. Consider a practical example. Imagine you're working on a project that feels overwhelming. Instead of letting your mind race with thoughts of potential failure or judgment, bring your attention to the immediate step in front of you. Focus on the process, not the outcome. This shift in perspective isn't just calming, it's empowering. It allows you to approach challenges with clarity and purpose, rather than being weighed down by fear. To put this into practice, try this simple exercise. For the next hour, commit to being fully present in whatever you're doing. Whether it's a conversation, a work task, or even something as routine as washing dishes, give it your complete attention. Notice the details, the sensations, and the experience itself. When your mind starts to wander toward future worries, gently guide it back to the present. This isn't about perfection. It's about cultivating awareness and building a habit of presence. By embracing the Stoic practice of living in the moment, you're not just reducing anxiety, you're reclaiming your ability to act with intention and courage. The present is where life happens, where you have the power to shape your experience, one mindful moment at a time. What if wisdom could help you see failure as a stepping stone rather than a dead end? This is the power of the Stoic virtue of wisdom, its ability to transform how we perceive and respond to life's challenges. The Stoics believed that wisdom isn't just about knowing facts or theories. It's about understanding what truly matters and using that understanding to navigate life with clarity and purpose. Seneca once said, "Wisdom allows us to learn from every experience." Think about that for a moment. Every stumble, every setback, every moment of doubt can become a source of insight if we approach it with the right mindset. Take the example of Epictetus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers. Born into slavery, he faced hardships that could have easily crushed his spirit. Yet, through wisdom, he didn't just endure his circumstances. He used them to forge a deeper understanding of human resilience and freedom. He taught that external events are beyond our control, but our responses to them are entirely within our power. His life is a testament to how wisdom can turn even the most difficult failure into profound lessons. So how can you apply this in your own life? Start by reflecting on your past failures. What did they teach you? Maybe a missed opportunity showed you the importance of preparation, or a rejection revealed areas where you could grow. Wisdom helps us sift through these experiences, finding the lessons that can guide us forward. It's not about ignoring the pain of failure, but about seeing it as a teacher rather than an enemy. Here's a thought. Can you identify one lesson you've gained from a past failure? Something that, even if it was painful at the time, has shaped you into who you are today. That's wisdom at work, seeing the value in every experience, no matter how difficult. And as you cultivate this perspective, you'll find that failure no longer feels like a threat. Instead, it becomes a stepping stone, a part of the journey that helps you grow stronger and more resilient with each step. Stoics teach us to focus on effort, not results, a principle that can transform how we approach challenges and reduce the fear of failure. At its core, this idea is about understanding what is within our control and what is. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it simply, happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control and some things are not. When we shift our attention to the actions we take, the effort we put in, rather than the outcomes we can't fully predict, we free ourselves from the weight of expectations. Think about an athlete training for a competition. If their sole focus is on winning, every setback becomes a crushing blow. But when they concentrate on perfecting their technique, improving their stamina, and giving their best effort, they not only perform better but also find joy in the process itself. The outcome, whether a victory or a loss, becomes secondary. This mindset doesn't just apply to sports, it's a universal truth. By detaching from the results and committing to the journey, we build resilience and confidence. So here's a challenge for you. Set a goal, but instead of fixating on the end result, commit to the process. Focus on the daily steps, the small improvements, and the lessons you learn along the way. When you do this, failure loses its sting. It becomes just another part of the journey, a stepping stone rather than a roadblock. By embracing this Stoic principle, you'll find that fear of failure diminishes, replaced by a sense of purpose and progress. What if gratitude could diminish your fear of failure? It might sound simple, but the Stoics believed that cultivating gratitude is one of the most powerful tools we have to reframe our perspective and face challenges with courage. When we focus on what we have, rather than what we lack, we begin to see failure not as a defining moment, but as a temporary setback, a part of the larger journey. Once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive." This simple practice of gratitude can ground us, reminding us of the abundance that already exists in our lives, even when things don't go as planned. Take, for example, someone who lost their job unexpectedly. At first, they might feel defeated, questioning their worth and fearing what the future holds. But by consciously shifting their focus to what they still have, supportive relationships, good health, or even the opportunity to explore new paths, they can find the strength to move forward. Gratitude doesn't erase the reality of failure, but it helps us see it in context. It reminds us that failure is just one piece of a much larger picture. So how can you start practicing this today? Here's a simple exercise. Take a moment to list 3 things you're grateful for. They don't have to be grand or life-changing. It could be something as small as a warm cup of coffee in the morning or a kind word from a friend. By doing this regularly, you train your mind to notice the good, even in difficult times. Over time, this shift in focus can help you approach challenges with less fear and more resilience, knowing that no matter what happens, there's always something to be grateful for. Stoicism teaches us a profound truth. Perfection is an illusion. It's not something to chase, but rather a mirage that keeps us from truly living. The Stoics remind us that life is messy, unpredictable, and full of imperfections, and that's exactly what makes it beautiful. When we stop demanding perfection from ourselves, we begin to see failure not as a catastrophe, but as a natural part of growth. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." Think about that for a moment. It's through our struggles, our mistakes, and yes, even our failures that we build resilience and discover our true strength. Take the story of a famous artist who, instead of striving for flawless technique, chose to embrace the imperfections in their work. They allowed the cracks, the smudges, and the unexpected turns to become part of the art itself. What could have been seen as mistakes transformed into something uniquely human, something that resonated deeply with others. This artist didn't fear failure. They saw it as an opportunity to create something real, something alive. Now consider your own life. Where are you holding yourself to an impossible standard? Where could you let go of perfectionism and allow yourself to be human? Maybe it's in your work, your relationships, or even the way you see yourself. The Stoic approach isn't about giving up or settling. It's about recognizing that imperfection is where growth happens. When you stop fearing failure, you open yourself up to new possibilities, to creativity, and to the kind of courage that only comes when you're willing to take risks. So take a moment to reflect. What's one area where you can loosen your grip on perfection? What might you discover if you allowed yourself to stumble, to learn, and to grow without the weight of unrealistic expectations? The Stoics knew that embracing imperfection wasn't just about being kinder to ourselves. It was about freeing ourselves to live fully, boldly, and authentically. And that's a lesson worth holding on to. What if preparing for failure made it less intimidating? What if, instead of fearing the unknown, you could face it with confidence? This is the heart of the Stoic practice known as the premeditation of evils. It's not about dwelling on negativity or expecting the worst. It's about building resilience by mentally rehearsing potential challenges before they happen. Seneca, the great Stoic philosopher, once said, "The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." In other words, by imagining setbacks in advance, you disarm their ability to shock or overwhelm you when they occur. Think of it like this. If you've already walked through a difficult scenario in your mind, you're less likely to freeze or panic when it happens in real life. This practice isn't about predicting every detail of the future. It's about preparing your mindset to handle uncertainty with calm and clarity. Take the example of a leader like the Roman emperor who ruled during turbulent times. He often wrote in his personal journal about the challenges he might face, betrayal, failure, or even death, and how he would respond. By doing this, he wasn't inviting despair. He was training himself to stay steady, no matter what came his way. So how can you apply this in your own life? Start by choosing a situation that feels daunting to you. Maybe it's a big presentation at work, a difficult conversation, or even a personal goal you're afraid to pursue. Now, close your eyes and imagine the worst-case scenario. What could go wrong? How would you handle it? Visualize yourself staying calm, making thoughtful decisions, and finding a way forward. This mental rehearsal doesn't just prepare you for failure. It reminds you that even in the face of setbacks, you have the strength to adapt and persevere. By practicing, you're not avoiding fear. You're transforming it into a tool for growth. Stoics teach us to avoid extremes in our reactions to failure, and this is where the virtue of temperance comes into play. Temperance in Stoic philosophy is about self-control and moderation. It's the ability to keep our emotions in check, even when things don't go as planned. It doesn't mean suppressing how we feel. Rather, it's about not letting those feelings dictate our actions or cloud our judgment. Once wrote, "You have to assemble your life yourself, action by action." This is a reminder that every choice we make, especially in moments of adversity, contributes to the kind of life we build. Temperance helps us make those choices with clarity and purpose, rather than being swept away by frustration or despair. Think about someone who faced a significant setback, like a business owner whose company went bankrupt. Instead of reacting impulsively or giving in to despair, they chose to reflect on what went wrong, learn from the experience, and start again with a clear mind. This kind of composure isn't just admirable, it's practical. It allows us to see opportunities where others might only see obstacles. Temperance gives us the space to respond thoughtfully rather than react emotionally, and that can make all the difference in how we move forward. So how can you practice temperance in your own life? The next time you face a failure, big or small, pause for a moment. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I respond in a way that aligns with my values and goals? By cultivating this kind of mindful approach, you're not just building resilience. You're also creating a life that feels balanced and intentional, even in the face of challenges. What if failure wasn't the end of the road, but instead a test of your character? What if every setback was an opportunity to prove just how resilient you truly are? This is the Stoic perspective on failure, a perspective that flips the script on how we view challenges. For the Stoics, failure isn't something to fear or avoid. It's a chance to grow stronger, to refine your character, and to show the world and yourself what you're made of. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, put it this way: difficulties show what men are. In other words, it's not when things are easy that we discover who we are. It's when things get tough. Think about it. When life is smooth sailing, there's no need to dig deep, no reason to push beyond your limits. But when failure strikes, that's when your true character is revealed. Do you crumble under pressure, or do you rise to the occasion? Do you let fear paralyze you, or do you use it as fuel to keep moving forward? The Stoics believed that every challenge, every failure is a kind of test, one that allows you to demonstrate your strength, your patience, and your ability to adapt. Take the story of Thomas Edison, for example. He failed over 1,000 times before successfully inventing but he didn't see those failures as defeats. Instead, he famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison understood that each failure was a lesson, a stepping stone on the path to success. His resilience in the face of repeated setbacks is a perfect example of what it means to view failure as a test of character. So the next time you face a setback, try shifting your perspective. Instead of seeing it as a dead end, see it as a challenge, an opportunity to prove your resilience and grow stronger. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I use this experience to become a better version of myself? When you approach failure with this mindset, it stops being something to fear and starts being something to embrace. After all, it's not about avoiding failure, it's about how you respond to it. And that's where true strength lies. Stoics have a profound way of shifting our perspective, encouraging us to see failure not as the end of the story, but as just one chapter in a much larger narrative. Think about it. When we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, the fear of failure begins to lose its grip. It's no longer this looming, insurmountable obstacle, but rather a stepping stone in the journey of growth and self-discovery. Seneca once said, "Life is like a play. It's not the length, but the quality of the acting that matters." What he meant is that it's not about how many times we stumble or fall, but how we rise, adapt, and bring meaning to our experiences. Take the story of Thomas Edison, for example. He famously failed thousands of times while trying to invent but instead of seeing each failure as a defeat, he reframed it as a lesson, saying, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." By focusing on the bigger picture, his vision of illuminating the world, he turned what could have been paralyzing setbacks into a pathway to success. His failures weren't the end of his story, they were essential parts of it. So what about you? How do your current challenges fit into the broader narrative of your life? When you're facing a moment of doubt or fear, ask yourself, what role does this play in my growth? How will this chapter shape the person I'm becoming? By shifting your focus to the bigger picture, you can begin to see failure not as something to dread, but as an opportunity to learn, adapt, and ultimately thrive. This Stoic practice isn't about ignoring the pain or difficulty of failure. It's about giving it context, meaning, and a place in the grander story of your life. What if you could learn from the failures of those who came before you? The Stoics believed that history is one of the greatest teachers we have, not just for understanding the past, but for preparing us to face the future. One of the most famous Stoic philosophers once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." At first glance, this might seem like a call to rise above pettiness or conflict, but it's also a profound reminder to observe the mistakes of others and choose a different path. Stoicism teaches us to study the lives of those who stumbled, not to judge them, but to extract wisdom. Think about it. Every failure, whether personal or historical, is a lesson waiting to be learned. When we look at the missteps of others, we gain insight into what doesn't work, and more importantly, why it doesn't work. This isn't about finding fault, it's about finding understanding. By examining how others have navigated challenges, we can avoid making the same errors ourselves. Take, for example, a mentor who once shared their story of failure with you. Maybe they took a risk that didn't pay off, or perhaps they made a decision they later regretted. What made their story valuable wasn't the failure itself, but the way they reflected on it, learned from it, and grew stronger because of it. That's the kind of resilience we can emulate. When we listen to these stories, we're not just hearing about what went wrong, we're being shown how to rise after the fall. This is why Stoics encourage us to seek out stories of resilience, whether from history, literature, or the people around us. These narratives remind us that failure isn't the end, it's a stepping stone. When we see how others have overcome setbacks, we're inspired to believe that we can too. So, take the time to learn from those who walked this path before you. Their failures might just be the map that guides you to success. Stoics teach us that discipline is the antidote to fear. Think about it. Fear often thrives in the chaos of uncertainty, in the moments when we feel unprepared or out of control. But when we embrace self-discipline, we create structure and purpose. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. Consistent effort, even in small steps, builds confidence over time. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." This profound truth reminds us that freedom, true freedom, comes from mastering our impulses, our distractions, and our fears. Discipline isn't about restriction, it's about liberation. Consider the story of a musician who struggled with stage fright for years. Every performance felt like a battle against paralyzing fear. But instead of avoiding the stage, they committed to practicing daily, even when it felt uncomfortable. Over time, the repetition of disciplined practice rewired their mindset. The fear didn't disappear overnight, but their confidence grew with each small victory. Eventually, they stepped onto the stage not as a prisoner of fear, but as a master of their craft. Discipline works because it shifts the focus from what we fear to what we can control. It's not about eliminating fear entirely. That's impossible. It's about building the inner strength to move forward despite it. So, what's one small, disciplined action you can take today? Maybe it's setting aside 10 minutes to meditate, writing down your goals, or even just taking a deep breath before tackling a task that scares you. These small acts of discipline might seem insignificant, but they're the building blocks of courage. The Stoics didn't promise an easy life, but they did promise that with discipline, we could face life's challenges with resilience. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, you're not just overcoming fear, you're reclaiming your power. And that's where true freedom begins. What if every failure brought you closer to success? This might sound counterintuitive, but it's a core idea in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics believed that setbacks aren't obstacles, they're essential steps on the path to growth. As Seneca once said, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. In other words, what we often label as failure is simply the closing of one chapter, making room for the next. Take the story of Thomas Edison, for instance. He famously failed thousands of times while inventing the light bulb. But instead of seeing those attempts as defeats, he reframed them as discoveries. Each failure taught him what didn't work, bringing him closer to what did. This mindset shift, seeing failure not as a dead end but as a stepping stone, is what Stoicism encourages. It's about recognizing that progress often comes disguised as struggle. So how can you apply this to your own life? Start by asking yourself, what did this setback teach me? What can I take from this experience to move forward? When you reframe failure as progress, it loses its power to intimidate or discourage you. Instead, it becomes a tool for growth, a necessary part of your journey. Every stumble, every wrong turn is simply a chance to learn and adjust your course. That's the Stoic way, turning what feels like defeat into fuel for your next success. Stoics teach us that even failure can have purpose. This might sound counterintuitive at first. After all, failure often feels like a dead end, a roadblock that stops us in our tracks. But what if we could see it differently? What if failure wasn't the end of the road, but the very thing that redirects us toward a more meaningful path? This is the Stoic perspective. Setbacks aren't just obstacles, they're opportunities to grow, learn, and discover what truly matters. One of the most renowned Stoic philosophers put it succinctly: what stands in the way becomes the way. In other words, the challenges we face, our failures, our disappointments, don't have to defeat us. They can become the tools we use to build resilience, clarity, and purpose. When we look at failure through this lens, it stops being something to fear and starts being something to embrace. It's not about avoiding mistakes, it's about finding the meaning hidden within them. Take the story of Thomas Edison, for instance. He famously failed thousands of times while trying to invent the electric light bulb. But instead of seeing those attempts as wasted effort, he reframed them as steps toward success. He once said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." For Edison, failure wasn't a sign of defeat. It was a necessary part of the journey. It gave him the knowledge and determination to eventually succeed. So what about you? What meaning can you find in your own failures? Maybe a setback at work taught you a skill you didn't know you needed. Maybe a personal disappointment revealed a deeper truth about what you value most in life. The Stoics remind us that failure isn't the enemy, it's the teacher. When we stop fearing it and start learning from it, we unlock the potential to turn even our most difficult moments into sources of strength and purpose. The next time you face a failure, ask yourself, what is this moment trying to show me? Could it be a chance to grow, to redirect, or to uncover a mission you hadn't considered before? When we find meaning in our struggles, we transform them from stumbling blocks into stepping stones. And that's where true resilience begins. What if humility could free you from the fear of failure? It's not the first trait that comes to mind when we think about overcoming obstacles, but the Stoics saw humility as a quiet, yet powerful strength. Epictetus once said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." In other words, when we let go of ego and embrace humility, we create space to grow, to learn, and to move forward, even when we stumble. Humility, in the Stoic sense, isn't about diminishing yourself. It's about recognizing that you're a work in progress, and that's perfectly okay. Think about a leader who faced a major setback, someone who had to confront their own mistakes publicly. Take, for instance, a CEO who acknowledged a failed product launch and took full responsibility. Instead of deflecting blame or clinging to pride, they chose humility. They admitted their missteps, listened to feedback, and used the experience to improve. In doing so, they not only regained trust but also set the stage for future success. That's the power of humility in action. It allows us to face failure head-on, without shame or defensiveness, and turn it into an opportunity for growth. So how can you apply this to your own life? Start by approaching challenges with an open mind. When you feel the fear of failure creeping in, remind yourself that not knowing everything isn't a weakness, it's a chance to learn. Ask questions, seek advice, be willing to admit when you're wrong. Humility doesn't mean you lack confidence. It means you're confident enough to acknowledge your imperfections and keep moving forward. And in that openness, you'll find a freedom from fear. A freedom that allows you to take risks, grow, and ultimately thrive. As we wrap up our journey through the 22 Stoic teachings, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on the profound power these principles hold. Together, they form a roadmap, not just for overcoming the fear of failure, but for transforming that fear into a force for growth. Each teaching, whether it's about embracing what's within your control, practicing resilience, or staying grounded in the present moment, builds on the others to create a foundation of unshakable mental strength. It's not about eliminating fear entirely. That's impossible. Instead, it's about learning to move forward despite it, using fear as a tool rather than a barrier. The themes we've explored, Resilience, presence, and self-discipline are more than just abstract ideas. They're practical tools you can apply in your everyday life. Resilience reminds us that setbacks are temporary and often necessary for growth. Presence keeps us anchored in the here and now, where we have the power to act. And self-discipline ensures that we stay focused on what truly matters, even when distractions or doubts arise. These are the pillars of Stoic wisdom, and they're as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." Think about that for a moment. Just as exercise builds physical strength, challenges build mental fortitude. Each time you face a fear of failure, each time you stumble and get back up, you're strengthening your mind, you're growing. And that's the essence of Stoicism, not avoiding hardship, but embracing it as an opportunity to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. So as we close, I want to leave you with a question to ponder. What's one Stoic principle you'll use to face your next challenge? Maybe it's focusing on what you can control, or perhaps it's reminding yourself to stay present in the moment. Whatever it is, take that teaching with you and put it into practice. The more you apply these ideas, the more natural they'll become. And finally, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What's been your biggest takeaway from these teachings? How do you plan to use Stoicism to overcome your fear of failure? Let's keep the conversation going. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more Stoic wisdom. Together, we can all grow stronger, one principle at a time.